They can see in nearly all directions, breathe through their permeable skin, and jump up to 20 times their own body length in a single leap. Frogs might be small, and frog face might mean stupid face in the language of human insults. However, they are known to be great athletes, and the size of their tongue is quite impressive. The way they use it should make those who are being called frog face quite proud. As they are amphibians, they are familiar with both aquatic and terrestrial environments. Some of them are venomous, and some of those who aren't sometimes get eaten by us. Around 7,000 species of frogs have been identified, which means there are many of them existing, considering the amount of eggs they lay when reproducing. Additionally to these 7,000 species laying eggs, many frogs are given birth by the realm of the human imagination. Mark Twain's short story named The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, written in 1865, popularized the jumping of the frog and even inspired the celebrated frog jumping competition taking place yearly all around the U.S.
31-63 with that one balloon left. 222.
Watch out, Tom!
He's makes a lot of noise, makes fishy noise like snoring.
I am not sure this little girl has read Mark Twain. She might, however, be familiar with the Grimm's brother tale, The Frog Prince, about a princess kissing a frog that turns into a prince. This idea that frogs can change their form comes from their natural metamorphosis, from eggs to embryo, to tadpole with 2 legs, to tadpole with 4 legs, to a frog. I found this image of mating frogs on YouTube, and the only information I know about its location is that it was shot in the pond of someone's garden. Let's however pretend it's the Nile, so that it accompanies my upcoming words. The potential of frogs as symbolic meanings already emerged in ancient times. During the annual flooding of the Nile, which was very much praised by ancient Egyptians for vital reasons, these animals appeared in great numbers, and it was also the perfect time for them to mate. It is thus not surprising that Heket, the Egyptian goddess of renewal and fertility, is often represented as a woman with a frog head. Here, unlike in the tale of the Frog Prince, the frog has not left its body to become a prince, but is part of the goddess's morphology. Anyhow, she mostly appeared under this anthropomorphized form in temple reliefs. But temples are big. One can walk around them and at the best go inside of them. One can contemplate them along with their reliefs. But if someone wanted to be accompanied by Heket's power on a daily basis, they had the possibility of carrying with themselves a smaller representation of the deity. In its amuletic shape, Heket was rather represented in a zoomorphic form, as we can see here. It is, however, difficult to give an objective impression of objects through photographs. This frog amulet might appear to be as big as this relief, but it is actually only 8 mm wide and 9 mm high. But just like small animals have great skills, small objects are not devoid of strong effects, as they usually have individual owners while they're being used and belong to the realm of private possessions rather than public monuments. Their owners can develop a particular attachment to them. In ancient Egypt, amulets were very abundant, and more than having a decorative purpose, as they're likely to have for us nowadays, they were used for their magical power. In the case of frog amulets, which were mostly attributed to Heket, the goddess of fertility, they could, for example, protect from miscarriage or offer fecundity. In some way, the belief in magical amulets is a reflection of our fears or powerlessness towards some natural threats. They are supposed to compensate for what we cannot necessarily control. This frog amulet is 4 cm long and wide. It was certainly used as a necklace. It comes from Egypt. Nevertheless, it differs from the previous ones by the fact that the Christian cross is engraved on its button. It is sadly not visible on that only picture that I found of it, but it is a significant detail. In fact, if this is a Christian object, then the frog cannot be representing Heket anymore. It is to be dated between the 4th and the 5th century after Christ, at the beginning of the large expansion of Christianity. It is in opposition to the pagan discourses that the Ecumenial Council instaured the Christian doctrine. As such, they were not only banning the Egyptian polytheism, but also many practices around it. Amongst these, the use of amulets. Indeed, as I said before, amulets were believed to have a transferable power to the owner. Hence the fear of some Christians who were associating them with fraud and illusion, and went so far as to say they would arouse sexual desire or handicap a competitor. Ironically, this amulet is not only Christian, but also in the shape of a frog, which, as we saw before, is a common object in Egyptian paganism. The reason for it is that amulets were so embedded in people's lives that they could not just ban it. So, they decided to use them for their own benefits. The Christian use of amulets was, however, differentiated by the 4th century theologian Augustine of Hippo. According to him, Christian amulets were edifying the community of Christian believers and serving the general good, unlike pagan amulets, which he accused of supporting selfish and individual pursuits. Here we see St. Augustine holding a burning heart in his hand. Whether it is his own or the one of Jesus is unknown, but the flames are dancing towards his head and seem to enlighten his mind, as if passion had struck him while he was writing his texts. This is of course a metaphor. Holding a burning heart would hurt more than inspire. Anyhow, holding something, anything, is a quite meaningful experience. Indeed, when one holds something, one has the responsibility of not letting it fall, so in a simplified manner, holding something is a proof of care. This responsibility grows the more fragile that thing is, and a high peak is reached when one is holding something alive, as a newborn baby, although this one was never born. Now, if people in ancient times were believing the amulets to have a transferable power, they were somehow considering them as being alive. So holding an amulet was not just like holding any other object. The owners were surely taking great care of these magical objects. Some were quite fragile, like this one made out of faience, but even the stronger ones were not devoid of getting stolen or lost. As such, there was a mutual dependency between the object and the owner. One provides a special energy and the other one protects it, not like in the frog jumping competition, where the frog tries to escape this entertainment trap as soon as it can. This one is made out of bronze and fits perfectly in the palm of a hand. If it was hanging on a necklace, which was probably the case, it must have accompanied the owner on all sorts of activities. One must have felt it jumping on the same spot under the neck while walking, not as high as a real frog, but still. This metallic frog was animated not only by its spiritual power, but also by its weight, or by the touch of that absorbing material that bronze is. I can imagine that on warm days, the frog must have burned like St. Augustine's heart. So, to resume everything and bring this to an end. On one hand, we have the frogs, who can jump up to 20 times their own body length in a single leap, who can breathe through their permeable skin and can see in nearly all directions, who taste deliciously tender when they're edible, and who can be fatally poisonous when they're poisonous. And then we have this inanimate metallic object representing a frog that can only move if we make it move, that tastes like metal and needs to be taken care of. But because of our understanding of the frog and its natural specificities, we associate the frog's representation with the frog's abilities and believe in its transferable power. And then we have this other metallic frog that is used as a diffusion of a doctrine. It is fascinating to see where our imagination can lead us, that we make a heavy metallic fixated thing out of a light and jumping creature and create a whole narration around it that guides our lives. In some way, holding an inanimate imitation of an animal in their hands is similar to owning a toy, and toys are for children an agent of imagination, a starting point of narrative.